Everyone, welcome to the next video in the Akita series for YouTube. As always, I hope this video is helpful. If you've got any questions, feedback, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll absolutely get back to you. As always, if you want to support the channel, feel free to hit the like button. Check out the links in the description below if you're interested in additional, more in-depth video content, or if you're interested in one-to-one tuition. And I'm also available for commissions if you want to get anything painted. So feel free to get in touch. Here we go. So we're going to start off by basically base coating the bra with Vallejo model color dark Prussian blue, and then towards the bottom I'm blacking them out. So this is Vallejo model color black that you can see me putting on the whole bottom half. The idea with this is I either want this to be so incredibly dark so no one is really going to focus on it. Potentially I can put some bounce reflection underneath them if I choose later. I do end up putting purple bounce reflections on there. I'm not going to go over that in this video, but it's basically the idea is this is like the secondary light, which is maybe bouncing off the skin or something like that. But we'll get into that on a later video. Now, the priority here is first of all, if you notice, like I put that black down quite heavy. So there was quite a large transition line between where the black turns into the blue. So the first thing that I need to do is smooth that out. And with this bra, I want a really, really smooth finish. So the idea with this is we're going to be doing either a lot of glazing or a lot of very thin stippling. Now you can also see I've mixed up. This is not the dark Prussian blue. This is P3 Cygnus blue highlight. Now, the reason why I did that is because if you add white to the dark Prussian blue, it starts going to a very light ice yellow, ice blue kind of color. It becomes very desaturated. So I wanted something a little bit more vibrant for the mid-tone for the color of this bra. So I went with the Cygnus blue because it's almost just like a magic blue. It's quite vibrant. Now, again, you can see I've laid down quite a solid base color of this, and then we have those very hard lines where it transitions from that dark Prussian blue into the Cygnus blue. So same as we did with the black, glazing over these two transition areas where it changes from the dark Prussian blue to the Cygnus blue. Now what I will say is you're going to see a lot of points where I'm just waiting for it to dry. I'm being quite lazy. You guys know me, I don't particularly like glazing. So I'm being a little bit lazy with it. What I would say is if you're putting your glaze on the model and it's taking a while to dry, you could have less paint on your brush. The idea is that when you put your paint on the model, that glaze consistency paint should dry within like a couple of seconds. Mine isn't because I've got quite a lot of paint on my brush, and this was done on live stream, so I'm talking at the same time, so it's not so much of a big deal. But remember, like if you're unsure about glazing, go check out the video. But ideally what you want to do is you want to have your paint as thin as you need to be, so you want it really, really transparent. You want to remove the excess from your brush. So when you put the paint on the model, not a lot of paint goes on and it dries incredibly quickly. Now you'll also see that I'm doing a bit more of a traditional glaze as well. Like normally when I do glazing, I do very small brush strokes, but at this point I'm using like quite big strokes. So I'm trying to just minimize any textural results that I might leave from my brush strokes. So in this case, I'm still using the point of my brush as opposed to the side of my brush, just because that's the way I like to paint. But for yourselves, if you use the flat of your brush, the side of your brush, then what that's going to do is it's going to give a much bigger brush stroke, and it's going to minimize any marks that you might leave, and it will give you a much smoother result. You can see me doing that here, how I'm using the side of my brush. Though again, this is painting preference for me. Although I'm using the side of my brush, I'm still using towards the tip of my brush, just because I quite like painting quite a controlled fashion. If I'm doing anything where it minimizes the amount of control that I have over my brush stroke or paint application, I generally don't enjoy that. It's not for me. So, which is why the majority of the time when you see me paint, I'll use the tip of my brush unless I'm really doing something specific. I like small brush strokes. That's not to say that that's correct. That's just a preference to my painting process. So if you guys are not a fan of that, then don't do it. Feel free. Remember, like I'm not showing you the right way of painting. I'm showing you my way of painting and trying just to explain my thoughts process on it as much as possible. But you can see how this dark blue and this light blue has now smoothed out, and we've got a fairly nice transition between the colors. So what we need to do now is we need to start brightening up. It looks okay. If you can see on the right side of the bra, you can see how flat it is, and that's how the left was as well. But now what I've done is I've started adding some white to that Cygnus blue. Cygnus blue. It's P3 Cygnus blue highlight. So I'm now brightening it up, and the idea is because the light is coming from the left-hand side, as we see her on the screen, the left-hand side of that bra is going to be the bright section, and it's going to be the same on the right-hand side, on the right breasticle. This breasticle thing seems to have become a thing in these videos. On the right breasticle, it's still going to be the left-hand side that we're going to have our bright spot. Now, what you need to remember is you guys go as bright as you want to go. Now, me, everything about this model is shiny, it's vibrant, it's very over the top. That's what I wanted with it. I'm going quite extreme with my highlights, even on the clothing. Now, what you're going to notice for this particular part of the model, what happens is or rather in general when I paint, to be honest with you, the smaller my area that I want to highlight, the smaller my brush strokes become. So now you're going to start seeing where I'm going to start doing very small marks, like very small brush strokes with the tip of my brush, or I'm just going to stipple. So I'm going to paint tiny little dots. And again, this is about control for me. It always comes back to control. If I want to have a really smooth blended transition, I would rather stipple that transition with ultra thin paint, with paint which is like a glaze consistency, build them up very slowly. And even if I have quite a hard line and I want to smooth it out with a sweeping brush stroke, you'll see that my brush stroke is mostly with the tip of my brush, so even then I'm doing very thin marks. And although everyone's style develops as they go, your style will come down to the painting processes that you enjoy. A big part of the style of your painting will come down to those particular processes that work for you. So this is really important. So when I say don't copy what I'm doing, use what I'm doing to find your own processes, that's important, really important for you guys, just to find out how you want to paint and what sort of what sort of result that you actually like. Because your result will come from your choices in your brush strokes and your paint consistencies. Now you can see I've been building up like this line of light along the bra. Well, now what's going to happen as well is I'm going to push this even brighter, so we're going to go to almost an off-white. So I'm thinking of this bra, when I'm painting this, I'm thinking of it very much as like a non-metal metallic, in the sense of the smaller my highlight area, the shinier it is going to look, because the rules that we use for non-met are the rules that we still use for everything else, to be perfectly honest with you. So if we think about that, what that means is I'm going really bright with this bright spot on the peak of the breast, the peak of the bra. And then if I wanted this to look really shiny, I could put that bounce reflection underneath, which is what I end up doing. But I haven't recorded it because I'm going to end up getting rid of it because I don't actually like it. I don't think it's the strongest choice there. But anyway, I digress. So you can see me trying to smooth this transition where it goes over towards the darker area, and I'm just doing that with lots of tiny little dots. So remember, what we can do is the darker section, you go over the darker side of our part that we want to transition to smooth out the transition. Go over the darker side with the lighter paint, again really thin. Paint is thinned down to say 4 or 5, maybe 6 parts water to 1 part paint. So the paint is so transparent. What's going to happen is the paint is going to just tint the darker area. So the more dots and the more marks that you put over that dark section, the brighter it's going to become. So you can keep building up those marks until you get a very soft transitions into the lighter area. You can do exactly the same with the light side. If you want the lighter area to become darker, you want to smooth the transition at the same time, then all you've got to do is go back to that darker paint, make it really, really thin, transparent. So again, 4, 5, maybe 6 parts water, depending on what your paint is. And then place those marks, those small marks, those dots, those little scratches, whatever you're using, and you'll gradually tint that lighter area to become darker and darker. This will soften the transition and bring it together. And also it allows you to adjust shape, your volume, so adjust the shape of your highlight or your shadow. So you can make very minor adjustments as you're going to get a volume spike. This is a really useful tool. Now, again, I'm talking about lots of little marks. If you don't particularly want to paint like that, then all you need to do is just adjust your brush stroke. So if you look at, say for example, if we look at Andy Wardle's painting, when he paints, although he does do this sort of painting as well, the majority of the time when he's painting, he uses very large sweeping strokes. So he'll use his brush, he'll use a larger brush than I would use, and he'll use the side of his brush. He'll do a more traditional glaze, and he'll run from either the light to the dark area, or he'll run from the dark to the light area. It's not to say he paints like that all the time, but that's a preference of his painting process. You can see the bra on the left hand side is kind of done, but what's going to happen now is as I start painting this right hand side, what I end up feeling like is, although I like it, the left hand breast could be brighter, that it could pop more, because the left hand one, remember, our light is coming from the top left, so the left hand breast is closer to our light source. So and the angle of the breast is receiving our light source like flat on. So there's really good opportunity for a real bright spot there. So I'm going to come back to that. So just because I'm happy with the result that I've got on it doesn't mean that it's finished. This is one thing, like, you really can't be too precious about your paint jobs. And I am a bit of a hypocrite in saying that, because as soon as I start painting something for myself, nothing is ever good enough. And I do have that problem, just like everyone else does. But you really don't want to be too precious about your paint jobs. Just because you've done something really nice does not mean that you shouldn't be willing to come back and change it. This is really important, because remember, it's so important for every single individual area to work in conjunction with everything else. And if let's say for example, if you've painted the face and you're absolutely happy, you're so happy with it, then that's an amazing feeling to have. But if you then paint the rest of the model and all of a sudden the face isn't drawing the attention because it's not bright enough, as an example, the highlight's not bright enough, you need to be willing to go back and change that face, because it's so important for the context of the piece to work. The composition is so important. And what you'll find is as you start becoming a technically better painter, and what I mean by that is your technical application of paint. So as you become better at glazing, stippling, wet blending, all this sort of stuff, what's actually going to happen is your painting will be more reliant on your composition and your theory and your knowledge and your artistic choices, as opposed to your application of paint. And what you'll find is all of a sudden you need to worry less about how well you paint and more about the choices that you make. And if you're at this point where you're too afraid to adjust things, then you're going to end up having a lot of problems, but you're going to end up holding yourself back quite a lot. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm rambling so much. So you can see on the right breast, all I've done is I've done exactly the same as I've done on the left, but I've smoothed it out. So I've smoothed it all out and I've pushed the highlight a little bit. So this is the same colours, low model colour black, dark Prussian blue, P3 Cygnus blue highlight, and then I've added some white to it. So this is where I've looked at it and gone, it looks a little bit flat. I want it a little bit shinier. So with that in mind, this is where I'm going to paint with dots. So I said to you guys, like, the smaller my highlight get, the smaller my areas that I have to work with, the smaller my brush strokes become. And that's just that's a habit that I fall into, and it works for me, so I don't need to worry about it too much. But you can see how I've just placed that bright spot on the peak of the breast. That's really, I really like that. All I need to do now is smooth that out. So once again, I'm going to go back that ultra thin glaze consistency of paint, and I'm going to smooth out the edges of those transitions, and I'm just going to make it a little bit more diffuse so it doesn't look like there's just a big blob of paint. Now, this paint does read as really bright. It reads as almost white. It's not actually anywhere near white. It's just a bright blue. It's just the eyes are telling us, because it's got so much dark around it, because the jacket is black, because the underneath of the bra is black. It reads as almost white because there's just so much darkness around it. Because remember, if the darker your area around something, the brighter it actually looks. Now, you can see as well, like, I've just placed a big old load of paint all over that, and it was really wet. I actually made a mistake there that you didn't see on cam. Basically, what happened was I dropped my brush on it and I had a massive brush mark of paint, so I had to wash it off. So don't think I was doing anything that I didn't explain. I was trying to fix a mess up that I made. This is one of the benefits. If you're working with really thin paint, fairly thin paint, what happens is if you make a mistake, you can get a wet brush and rub it off very quickly. The other thing that you're going to notice, so I wouldn't recommend you trying this. When I'm painting, see me dabbing the paint a lot with my finger. So where I use a lot of stippling and variations of stippling, I'm building up textures and I'm using lots of thin paint. You can use your fingers. Your fingers are a tool when you're miniature painting, especially on busts and larger scale stuff. Because what you can do is, if you've got a blob of paint on the model and it's a little bit too thick, what you can do is you can dab it with your finger, and your finger will basically separate all the paint and it will leave you lots of little marks. And that paint will diffuse and it will help and it will make it smoother, as opposed to leaving that really hard mark that you fix later. I will do a video on using your hands and using your finger when it comes to miniature painting, because as much as everyone jokes about finger painting and that sort of stuff, they are incredibly useful tools for you to use when you're doing display painting. Now, I mean, the bra itself at this point looks really nice. I've built up those, I've built up the highlight, especially on the left breast, really, really nice. Like, I really like the shape that I have. I like how bright it's become. And yeah, I'm content with it. The right hand side one, I know in my head I need to push that bright spot, because if you look at the right hand side one, although potentially that doesn't need to be as bright, it still needs to match with the left. So what we need is towards the peak of the curve of the top of the right hand side bra, we need to brighten that up as well. But my problem with this at this point is the bra feels very plain. It's just, there's no detail on it. It's just really plain. There's nothing there. So I decided that I wanted to just maybe put like a strap or something around the peak of it, around the curve of it, around the outside, just to add some kind of visual interest. Now, you don't have to do this. There are more interesting things that we could do with this as well, but bearing in mind, I don't want to go too crazy on this model. So the way that I'm going to do that is basically I'm going to paint on what will look like a physical detail. So first of all, what we're going to do is I'm going to get a very dark blue. So I'm going to get dark Prussian blue. I'm going to mix in some black, so we have a very, very dark line. We have a very, very dark paint, sorry. The reason why I'm going to do that is the darker the paint on this, the deeper the recess is going to look like. The deeper the recess is going to look. That's the words that I want. So after I stop smoothing this out, you're going to see me do it. So if you were to do... The idea of this is, the first line that we're going to paint is the recess, okay? So the brighter the line, the shallower the recess is going to look. Darker the line, deeper the recess is going to look. So this is where we're going to start. So I've got that dark Prussian blue with a hint of black mixed into it. Now, I'm not going to pretend like this is easy. The idea here is we need to paint a very crisp line. So when it comes to our paint consistency, we want to paint the paint to be as opaque as possible while still being fluid. So what that means is when we put our brush on that model, we don't want any resistance. We want to be able to do one strong sweeping line without the paint breaking or leaving little dots. Our paint consistency is incredibly important to get that nice crisp line. So we want it as opaque as possible while still being as thin as possible. I can't tell you what mix of water and paint that exactly is, because it depends entirely on what paint brand you're using, what color you're using. So best thing that I can say to you is as opaque as possible, because that means you only got to do one line. You don't want to have to paint over that line twice because it's difficult as it is. And then you want it as fluid as possible so you can do one long line. The next part I've gone in with, this is basically the bright mix of the P3 Cygnus blue highlight with a bit of white in it. And towards the right hand side, so the opposite side where our main light is coming from, painting a very thin line next to that dark line that I've painted. The idea with this is we're basically painting on an edge highlight where there is no edge. This creates the illusion of depth, creates the illusion that that dark line is actually sculpted into the model. It's really important. So this all comes down to paint consistency. Make sure you've got a nice tip on your brush. So remember, if you want a nice tip on your brush, remove any excess paint from your brush. Pull your brush along your hand or your kitchen roll or whatever you're using and twist it as you go to restore the point. And you want to test your brushstroke off the model first. So test your brushstroke on your hand or on your kitchen roll, because then if there's a problem, your tip isn't right, or if you've got too much paint on your brush or too much water in your brush, the mistake is going to happen off the model, not on the model. But that's what I've done with it. So it's a very simple process in theory, but it's actually incredibly difficult to do because you need a very consistent, crisp line. And that's where it becomes an issue. You want that line to be the same width all the way along, because if the line isn't the same width, you lose the illusion of depth, and that's where it becomes a problem. Actually physically doing it is very difficult. So next up, we're going to move on to the skin. Now, what's really important with the skin, the process is exactly the same as the bra. So I'm going to smooth everything out with the larger brush strokes and glazing, which you can see me doing on the transition, the dark area under the breast and the light area on the top of the breast on the right hand side, as you can see right now. Now, the big thing to remember with this is the highlights, the bright areas on the breast need to match the bra. So this is something that we've been talking about a lot at the moment, about breaking things down into very fundamental shapes. Ultimately, the breast itself is a cylinder, right? And then obviously the end, the actual bra part is a sphere. If we break the breast part down, where it connects all the way along, where it connects to the bra, that is effectively a cylinder. So our light should be a consistent line that goes down the breast and continues onto the bra. So this is really, really important. Now, what I would say is you don't necessarily need to go as bright on the actual skin as you do the bra, because they are two different material surfaces. So the value of your highlight does not need to be the same. And also your highlight does not need to be the same size, right? So your volume does not need to be the same size as the bra, because they are two different materials. So you could get away with the skin. For example, the skin could have a wider highlight, it could have a larger volume, or depending on the material that you're painting the bra as, the bra could have a larger highlight than the skin. So we don't have to worry about our volumes being consistent. We do need to worry about, we don't have to worry about the volumes being consistent in size, because we have two different material surfaces, textural surfaces. What we do need to worry about is we need to think about the highlight, the bright area, and the shadows, that those areas match and are consistent on the actual model itself. So they need to have, the highlight needs to be the same place in the skin and on the bra. I know that might seem obvious to some people, but it's something that a lot of people forget, and I went through a stage where I just never really thought about how different parts of the model interact. Because if you think about the shape of the breast and the bra itself, only difference is the lip where the bra is going over the breast. That's the only real change in the shape. It's almost like the physical height of it. So I appreciate that it's not always easy to understand when I'm just doing a voiceover as I'm painting. So I thought I'd just demonstrate. So this is where the model is at the moment. Obviously she's not finished. But what I'm talking about is, so you can see that the highlight area this is the bright area on the breast, on the actual skin itself. And then this is the bright area on the bra. You see that those two areas are next to each other. So if we were to not have this bra and have this as the whole breast, that highlight would still make sense. The bra wasn't there, so it continues on. And that's what I'm talking about, the highlight being consistent in this case. So what that means is if we were to change bra one, for example, so if I was to change the bra one, do that. It's just so this is what I'm talking about. So this is what I'm trying to explain. If your highlights are not consistent across a shape, then it's going to look really strange. So in this case, the bra is just complicating the shape. Ultimately, this is one shape. This up there is a cylinder. And then this section, let's actually put some, so this section here is a cylinder, and then this section as we go up, this section here is a sphere, and then this section here as we go up is a cylinder. So we highlight this area here as the cylinder, that would be the bright spot, and then that highlight will follow along the cylindrical shape. So I'm hoping that's clear. So now we just need to smooth this all out. You can see how the highlight on the breast now is mostly matching what we have on the bra. So the position is absolutely fine. With the breasts are quite, they receive a lot of light because they're obviously quite prominent. So the idea with this is the breasts are nearly as bright as the bright spot on the face. And one of the reasons for that is because I'm also going to be using the breast as a focal point. Now we've talked about our viewpoints, our map of viewpoints before. So the idea when we're painting models, especially a bust, is we want to guide people around our model. So what happens is the first thing that people look at is the face. So ideally we always want, if there is a face and eyes, we always want the focal point to be the face on a model. But what happens is people will look at someone's face first of all, and they'll look at someone's eyes. That's naturally what we do. But it gets really weird if we're staring into people's eyes for too long. So what happens is our view, our eyes will then dart around other parts of people's bodies. They'll look at other features, which is why not just men, everyone look at breasts when they're low cut, because they're a prominent feature. It's the same as if someone's got a badge or some kind of logo or jewelry, that sort of stuff. Those things become a feature, and our eyes dart to those features, and then they will come back to the face. We're looking to do a similar sort of thing with this miniature. So in this case, when we look at her from the front, I want the face to be the focal point, and then I need to give like secondary focal points for the viewer to look around and come back on. So it's like a map for the viewer to look at. So in this case, first focal point and most important one is the face. And then we're going to hopefully have the glove as the second focal point. And what we're going to do with that later on is when we look at the glove, when we look at the model from the front, the glove is going to be surrounded by blue. So hopefully the pink glove surrounded by blue, that causes the viewer to look from the face to the glove. And then the third viewpoint that we're going to have is we're going to use is the breasts, because the reality is we cannot stop the breasts from being a prominent feature of the model. They are going to be regardless, right? If they're painted well, people are going to look at them. So the breasts are then going to hopefully be the third, but they might be the second. Sure, it depends on how it looks at the end. So my rambling, basically what I'm trying to explain is the head is going to be the focal point, and then I want people to look at the glove, then I want them to look at the breasts, and then they will go back up to the head. Obviously, if we look at this model in detail, they're going to look everywhere, but we're talking about that initial glance. Do we have that map for people just to scan around? Because the benefit of that as well, this is something that we naturally do. When you meet someone next, just consciously try and understand what you're doing, because you will do it. Because if you stare into their eyes for too long, it gets really weird and uncomfortable, which honestly can be quite a lot of fun. But anyway, yeah, and what you'll do is you'll look at other features, and we need to do that with miniatures. But the benefit of doing that when we're painting miniatures is when you have people who are just, let's be perfectly honest, a lot of people who look at your miniatures, they don't necessarily understand the finer details on it because they're not potentially experienced enough. So if you've got these focal points, people to look around, you're not going to look at other areas. So if you're short on time, if you get those focal features, those really important parts really nice, no one's going to notice the less well painted sections. That makes sense. So if you've got little areas that you're not potentially confident on, not confident painting denim, for example, don't make the denim a feature unless people are going to notice it. So yeah, I mean, this is really, it is quite an important thing when it comes to display painting. We want the viewer to look at what we choose, so we're going to emphasize those points. You'll notice as well later on when I start painting the shoulder is very muted. It's not like there's a reason why I have not done like really striking non-metal metallic on this model, and I don't intend to, because it will overpower everything else. But anyway, sorry, I'm rambling again. Hopefully that's clear and it's helpful. You can see that I've smoothed out the breast loads. We've got that really nice shine point on the breast, which continues along into the bra itself. So we've got that nice consistent highlight on that cylindrical shape, which is what is the most important fact here. Like the consistency of light will make up for any of the more dodgy brush marks or anything like that, because this isn't painted perfectly. It's painted well, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm really happy with it, but it's not painting perfectly. But no one's really going to notice that unless you're looking at it properly up close. You can also see towards the top of the chest, so as she gets closer towards the hair, I've added more pink. This is like adding saturation around a very desaturated area, because that bright spot on the breast is ultimately that's very white. There's a lot of white in it. So by adding color around that, it makes it stand out even more. So that bright spot on the breast is actually much brighter, looks much brighter and powerful than it actually is, because it's surrounded by color. So I've skipped ahead a little bit in the sense that I haven't shown you me painting the left breast, because the video is going to be incredibly long for what is effectively exactly what I've just done. So what I wanted to talk about is the top of the chest and also the section between the breasts. So towards the top of the chest, I'm just going to push it more towards the pink tone of our skin tone. So this is more like that. This is just a very pink mid-tone. And what we're going to do with the center section of the chest, we're going to brighten that up towards the bottom. Now, what you're going to notice, the center section between the breasts, that is bright. It goes brighter towards the bottom, but it's not as bright as the main highlights that are on the breast. It's more like it's something in between the darkest shadows and the brightest lights. Don't want it to be a really prominent feature. Yes, it's going to receive light, but don't want it really, really bright. The other thing is if you're looking to do cast shadows, there should also be a cast shadow from the breast onto the chest. I'm not doing cast shadows on this. That's something that we'll probably go into on a later miniature in detail, but this I wanted to keep very simple in that regards. And you can see all I'm doing, because the thing is as well, when I'm outlining, when I've got these deep shadows on the breast, we don't need to go really bright. Remember, if we go you have lots of darkness around a fairly bright area, it looks brighter than it is. So if we push that highlight between the breasts like really, really bright, it's going to look really weird because those shadows are already making it look brighter than it is. Now with the top of the chest itself, this can be quite challenging, to be honest with you, because ultimately it's quite a flat color. Like, sorry, it's not quite a flat. It's quite a flat surface. There's not a huge amount of variation in the shapes. And so what we're going to do is towards the top of the chest, we're just going to follow on with that pink tone that we've got at the top of the breast there that you can see. So we want a consistent value. We want a consistent brightness. So that pink that we have at the top of the chest, that's going to continue up as a flat color all the way up. So we want a very opaque, so we want a very flat coverage, nice solid coverage of that pink. And what we're going to do is we're going to use, there's two ways of thinking about it. The way I'm thinking about it mostly is the light's coming from the left hand side. So the right hand side of that chest is going to be ever so slightly brighter. The other way of thinking about it is, as well, is you can use your highlights as a guide. We have this really strong bright highlight on that red. We have that really strong bright highlight on the right breast. So we can follow that highlight up the chest. It's not anywhere near as bright. Basically what's happening is the right hand side of this chest, where it's all pink, going to go ever so slightly brighter. You do not need a huge amount of contrast in value in this area. It is relatively flat. It's not got like big curves or big peaks or anything like that. We just need variation. We need it to look slightly different. And you can see as I'm painting this now, I'm going slightly brighter with it, but it's not a lot. The change between that pink on the left hand side and that brighter skin color on the right hand side of this chest that I'm painting is not huge. It's a subtle change. Indicates that the light is hitting this flat surface and adjusting it. Don't need anything over the top. It's simple. So that's the process. I'm hoping this has been helpful as always. I'm hoping it's been clear. I appreciate I've rambled on a couple of subjects. I apologize. If you want me to clear anything up, guys, please let me know in the comments. More than happy to do follow-up videos if needed. Let me know what you think. Once again, thank you everyone for your support. Really appreciate it. And catch you all later.